Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And my guest today is Dr. Lisa Damour. Lisa is a clinical psychologist. She directs Laurel School Center for Research on Girls. She has a private psychotherapy practice. She consults and speaks internationally and is a clinical instructor at Case Western Reserve University. She also writes a monthly column on adolescence in the Well section of the New York Times, and she is the author of Untangled, Guiding Teenage Girls Through the 7 Transitions into Adulthood, which actually is a New York Times bestseller and which we'll be talking about today. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. My children are past adolescence and they were boys, but I do understand the challenges of adolescence in any case. And I read your book, and they're so rich with information, not only information and ideas, but solutions and things you can think about and things you can do. So today we're just going to do sound bites. I want people to get a feel for what you have to offer them, if that's okay.
Sure.
So one of the things that struck me was we often talk about teenage years, particularly with girls, as kind of hormone driven. And that's why it's all happening. And you say that the brain remodels dramatically during the teenage years. The changes in your daughter's brain and the events that occur around her are more likely to shape her mood than the normal hormonal shifts occurring inside of her. So you're saying that there are actual physiological brain changes. Could you talk a little about that?
Sure. So as we've evolved in our understanding of the brain and its development, we've come to appreciate that the brain actually remodels a huge amount in the course of adolescence. And what we know is that it remodels from back to front, which is the order in which it initially developed. And it turns out that the emotion centers are in the back of the brain. So the part of the brain that takes in information and then has an emotional reaction to it gets upgraded before the control centers, which are in the front of the brain. So these poor teenagers have these very powerful, very reactive emotion response centers, and the parts of their brain that help them calm down or help them maintain perspective are not yet fully online. And so this is how you get really wonderful and really rational teenagers who sometimes seem like they have lost their minds. And then once they've calmed down, they can get perspective again, they can come back to a more, reasonable state. And I think the experience for the parent is, my kid seems crazy. And I think the experience for the kid is, I feel crazy. And I think that we now appreciate that there's a neurological reason for this. One of the things I like about talking in terms of brain development as opposed to hormonal development is that, first of all, it's more accurate. It actually fits better with what we know from the data. Second of all, it's more helpful for teenagers to explain it to this way to them as well. That yes. I have found that when I talk with teenagers about this, it makes sense, they get it, they feel less crazy, they feel relief. Whereas the hormone explanation also doesn't feel good. I mean, it makes them feel like, I'm out of
talking
control.
about PMS.
Yeah, nobody likes that explanation.
Yeah. And the thing that we tend to forget, so it's not like we as parents have to roll over and do nothing or, I can explain it so I can let it occur. We still have to guide them. But I think it gives us some breathing room to allow for those experiences. And it gives them some breathing room because, as you say, they feel crazy too.
They do. And I think one of the best things that we as adults can do is to not overreact to a girl's overreaction.
Right.
That I think that, it does feel out of control. Things happen very fast in the adolescent mind. And when adults get as upset or frightened as the girl is, it does 2 things. One is it actually makes her feel like, oh my gosh, this is really out of control. I thought I had a teenage-sized problem, but now the adult is freaking out, so maybe this is much worse than I thought it was. And the other is we're not there to be helpful in a useful way. That we're actually throwing gasoline on a fire as opposed to, throwing some water on it or just letting it burn out in its own time, which it almost always will. And I think that having a neurological explanation makes it feel a lot less personal for everybody involved.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I heard someone being interviewed and they were talking about emotional independence, like not getting dragged into somebody else's emotional real estate. so that they can be allowed to express that emotion, feel that emotion. And as parents, of course, we get very reactive. We want to fix it or stop it. And really, part of it is just allowing them to own their own emotional real estate.
That's a great turn of phrase. Absolutely. The advice I give in this section of the book, I don't give tons of advice, but I try to give pieces where I think they could be generically useful, is one thing parents can say is there anything I can do that won't make this worse?
Wow.
Right? And then that, does a lot of work in a very short space, because it's saying, I get how bad this is. I get that you feel terrible. I can stand it, right? Your big feelings are not actually terrifying me. I get that most of what I might try to do to help will actually make it worse, but I'm here, I'm available, I'm not going anywhere. And for a lot of girls, that phrase alone helps bring things down to size.
Yeah, and I think, I just saw something the other day talking about, children will, at every stage of development, will push against the boundaries and the parameters. And as teenagers, they're going to push a lot harder. And so it doesn't mean we have to acquiesce all the time, that in some sense, they're counting on you to stop them at the appropriate times.
Absolutely. One of the stories I tell in the book is a very common interaction I have in my private practice, where a girl will say to me, oh, Jenny's mom, she buys beer for us. It's kind of cool. And I say, is it cool or is it weird? And they say, it's weird. It's really weird. My mom, she's not cool like Jenny's mom, but at least she doesn't do stuff like that. I think that for teenagers, they feel like we're the ones who get to be out of control. We are the ones who are struggling with the rules. We need to know that the grown-ups are not acting like teenagers themselves.
Yes, yes. So I just want to go, you said, yes, I want to go into the whole world of technology. And you said research shows that intense use of digital technology can impair young girls' social skills and interfere with their healthy face-to-face relationships. So technology is here to stay.
Yep.
So how do you manage that, guide that, coach it, set boundaries around it?
I think you said the magic word, some boundaries. Kids need breaks from technology, and they're not great at self-imposing breaks, nor are adults, for that matter.
Yes.
Great
Oh my God,
self-imposing
yes.
breaks. And so I think the way I've come to think about technology is that teenagers use it to act like teenagers. They want to be connected to their friends. They want to talk about each other. They want to check in on how well they're being received by their peers. They want to do things that draw attention their way. You and I did the exact same things when we were teenagers. The problem with technology is teenagers don't get a break. I went home, you went home. At the end of the day, we couldn't look at anybody. Nobody could look at us. Eventually, somebody kicked us off the phone. There was downtime that was just a function of having poor technology. But that gave us a relief and some time off from being, completely interconnected with everything happening with our friends. And so I think, families really benefit when they say at dinner, everybody puts away their phones. And at 9 p.m., everybody puts away the technology. And when we're in the car together on a long ride, you can check it every half hour or so, but then the rest of the time it's just us. And it's not that technology is evil or that teenagers are evil. It's that we all need a break so that we can focus on being quiet with ourselves or enjoying in-person company or managing a hard feeling without stirring up drama. I mean, we all need those things. Yes. And teenagers need them as much as anybody.
Yes, and it's like, on the one hand, it's here to stay, but so is alcohol, and it doesn't mean you can consume tons of alcohol. Right. So it's the same thing. And you did mention that research shows that families that have dinner together more consistently, the kids do better in life, even yes. in later years.
Absolutely. This is a consistent finding that family dinner has some magic to it. And one of the things I've come to think about, and I've written about this a bit in the book, and then I've written about it for the New York Times, when we look at all of the research on good outcomes for kids, there's two qualities of family life that really make a difference. One is structure and one is warmth. That you need those two things together. And I think by the time a family's having dinner together, there's a lot of evidence of both of those. Because it actually takes a lot of structure to get everybody to the table, mm-hmm. right? I mean, in all of our families, everybody's going in 20 different directions. So for a family even to make it so that at least one parent and the teenager are sitting down, that takes time and effort to get to that level of structure. And then for a parent to say, it's a priority for us to sit down even for 10 minutes and be together, communicates a lot of warmth, right? It's,
Yes.
I care about you. I want to be with you. I'm going to arrange my schedule to make this possible. I'm going to impose this on you. And by the time you have those two things, everything's moving in the right direction. And I say this as often as I can because I think a lot of us feel like the benefit of family dinner is that we sit down and we have these fabulous heart-to-hearts and everybody's so lovely. And like, that is not what it looks like ever, right? I mean, maybe once in a blue moon. And I think it's more about the broader features of family life that show up when we all start trying to make a priority of just even a quick dinner together more nights a week than not.
Yeah, and even if there's more than one kid and they're teasing each other and whatever else, and even if it's argumentative at times, there is that interaction.
There is. And even for a parent to say, you know what, knock it off, that's not how we talk to each other. That's a structure moment.
Yeah.
Right? So that in and of itself gets at what we know is good for family life, even if nobody's having a good time. You know, and I think that
it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Even if nobody's having a good time.
Stuff. And we've come to a place where I think parents are made to feel like parenting's supposed to be pretty fun. Your kid's supposed to like you. Your kid's supposed to do what you ask them to do. You should be enjoying this. And if you're not, somebody's messing this up. And that in no way fits with what we know about normal development. Yes. Parenting's tedious. All of these things are hard.
Yes. Someone said to me years ago, if you base your self-esteem on what your teenager thinks of you, you're doomed.
Yes. Yes.
So it's really, they are going to be battling against you and telling you how wrong you are and whatever. But I think also you mentioned even a drive in the car, if you're just checking your technology, even just, you don't have to talk to each other. You're kind of there together, sharing space.
But that's valuable. I care about being with you.
Yeah. So then, this is another one. Teenagers benefit when adults distinguish thinking and feeling from doing, because everyone has thoughts and feelings that are unpleasant. Can you say a little bit about that?
Sure. I think this is true of humans universally, and then especially true of teenage girls. That I think teenage girls can sometimes feel like their thoughts and their feelings and their actions all have to be in perfect alignment. And so, for example, imagine a girl has a classmate she dislikes, which every girl's going to have a classmate she dislikes. So for some girls, they'll say, well, I don't like her, and this is what I feel, so I'm going to tell her, right? Because it's all got to be lined up. Other girls will think, I'm not supposed to tell her, and then I feel bad that I even had the thought and feeling, right? So some girls it'll cause aggression, some girls it'll cause anxiety, but neither of those are necessary. That one of the things we can say to girls, and I often say this to adults also, is thinking and feelings over here, doings over there. You cannot control the thinking and feeling. There's a lot of information there that you might want to access. You have to make careful choices about what you're going to do. So I say to girls all the time, well, of course you're not going to like all your classmates. I mean, there may be girls you downright dislike. That's fine. Enjoy it. Have your, icky thoughts about them. Yes. Imagine all the icky things you'd love to do. When you show up in the building at school, you must be polite. You never go below polite. That's the worst you can be. You don't have to be super nice. You don't have to go out of your way to be her best friend. But your doing can be and should be often separate from what you think and feel. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not manipulative, none of that.
And I think it's really important to be able to distinguish that. Even as adults, as you say, I'm a life coach, and I always say, you don't wake up in the morning choosing your thoughts. They just come slamming in, So then it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're going to have a terrible day. It's just noticing them. And as you say, they're rich with information. And then you get to choose how you want to behave around that.
Right. One of my favorite colleagues in town says, if you have a personal board of director, your thoughts and feelings have seats on the board. They are not the chairs of the board. And I just think that's
like that.
Smart.
Yeah.
Her name is Terry Tobias. It's brilliant stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to segue into this whole thing about popularity, because you talk about, how you define popularity, because very often you want to be with the popular people, but you don't even like them. And then you want to be popular, but being popular requires a lot of work, especially now. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of the research studies that I unpack in my book is a fascinating study that showed us that there's actually two kinds of popularity. When kids use the word popular, they actually mean two different things. Sometimes they mean popular like everybody likes the person.
Right.
Often they mean popular as in powerful. That this is somebody who everybody knows that she's willing to be mean, and so they want to be her friend so as not to be her target. And so one thing I have found very helpful for parents is to unpack that term a little bit. So when a girl says, oh, so-and-so, she's so popular, the parent can say, is she popular or is she powerful? Do kids like her, or do they just want to be her friend because she makes them nervous? And that is such a relief to kids because it takes popularity off of that pedestal.
Yes.
And it needs to come off of there. And then, like you say, however kids come by being popular, whether they have friends who genuinely like them or they have a lot of social connections for another reason, it turns out to be a very taxing position for the girl who's in it. That's a lot of kids to maintain, connections to. No group of girls or any adolescents is going to get along all of the time. So girls who have a lot of social connections are often doing a lot of peacekeeping or going back and forth between them. When we look at the research, the happiest kids have one or two good friends.
Wow.
And I love, anytime somebody gives me a chance to say that research finding, I say it, because that is such a relief for girls and families.
Yeah. And then again, if you look back, most of us in our own history, that one good friend, that was all we really needed.
It is. And one of the things, actually, some interesting work on this comes from anthropologists who talk about the necessity of sustainable routines. We all need to know in the day-to-day, if we're upset, who are we going to call? If we want to go out for the evening, who are we going to call? And that actually reduces stress very substantially. And when girls have many, many social connections, they get upset and they think, oh, if I call Molly and then she hears about it from Jenny, then she'll be mad at me, So something that should be automatic or could be automatic becomes fraught and causes stress.
And so great for teenagers to hear that, because it kind of lets them off the hook to keep trying harder, efforting, and feeling that it's something they have to live into, that they don't know how to do that. I'm going to jump to another subject because I think this one's really important. You say parents of teenagers must live with the painful truth that teenagers can and do engage in dangerous behavior. Instead of reflecting on why we have rules, teens focus on trying not to get caught while breaking them. So come out from behind the curtain and offer the real reasons for your rules. Frame conversations about dangerous behavior in terms of bottom line risks your daughter might face, not what will happen if she gets busted.
That's right. I think I will say I have taken care of teenagers and their parents for a long, long time now. And the most difficult problem I come up against is that parents are scared for their teens' safety and sometimes their life. And they are not wrong about those fears. That we do see a jump in death rates for adolescents. They take more risks than younger people and older people. They engage in things that have potential for irreversible consequences, drinking, driving, things like that. Knowing this, parents will sometimes adopt a stance of, I'm going to scare you straight, right?
Mm-hmm, yes.
So I will say, if I smell smoke on you, you're going to military school. And it comes from a loving place. But it will sometimes push kids to then think about, so how do I not get caught doing the thing you're telling me not to do? When what we really want is for a parent to say, cigarettes? Well, here's the deal with cigarettes. They're highly addictive. You could get lung cancer. I love you. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. We want to always frame it in terms of what's the safety risk? Why do we have the rule? Not because I love having rules, but because I love you. And the rules are there to protect you. And I think anytime parents can pivot to that space, they are helping to raise a safer teenager.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back as a teenager, if somebody said to me, lung cancer, whatever, I mean, even adults, lung cancer, some people get it, I'm not going to get it. So I suspect there's no magic formula for what you say to your kids. And kids, I think, just really on some level think they're invincible and it's not going to happen to them. There was one example you gave in the book that I thought was really striking about some girl who was invited out by a guy to go on a boat or something, and she had said yes, and So instead of saying, "Are you crazy?" it was like, "Do you really?" I think the questions you asked her: "Do you really want to go? Do you know him?" So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, all of the stories in the book are somewhat fictional because I had to take things that had happened in real life and then disguise
Sure.
them so thoroughly
Sure.
that neither my client nor anybody else could recognize themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. So, the way I tell the story in the book, but it's very much grounded in events that occurred,
Sure.
is that a very delightful adolescent girl came to my practice one afternoon and said, "Wait till you hear what I'm up to for the weekend." And she describes that she's going to go out on a boat on Lake Erie with a guy she doesn't know all that well. And of course, I'm starting to panic as a clinician because this is really frightening.
Sure.
And she says, "Don't worry, don't worry. I've thought it all through." Right. So I'm thinking, okay. And then she goes on to describe how she's thought through not getting caught by her mother. Right. And she describes this elaborate scheme involving cell phones and friends and all of those things. And I pulled myself together and I said to her, "You getting caught by your mom is the least dangerous thing that could happen to you this weekend." And thank goodness it actually worked for me to say that, because she then could step back and think about the realities. But she was so focused on not getting caught that she wasn't thinking about the risks that she was considering. And once we actually detailed the risks, she actually ran them down for me. She said, "Oh, I don't think I want to do this,
Yeah.
But again, when kids are tracking the adults or the cops or the principal and how to not get busted, they're looking in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So they're always going to do that, and I remember doing that. But at the same time, if we educate them to think about, okay, let me just think this through. What are the possible, so here I've arranged not to get caught, but let me just also think, okay, so is there anything dangerous about this? Do I really want to do that? And I think it's just educating them and training them to think.
That's how we want them to be thinking.
Yeah. So then there was, let's go into body image and what girls will do to.
I've actually lost sound on you.
Let me just keep talking. And
there we go. It's back.
Okay, good. So this is it's great that we can talk via Skype, but then of course there are always the possibilities of breakdowns. So the whole thing about body image, I mean, it's such an overwhelming and compelling thing for the world, mostly. And but as teenage girls, oh my God, it is so easy to get consumed by and thinking that your value lies in your body and body image and whatever. You have anything you can give some tools and strategies for that?
It is tough. I mean, for exactly the reasons you describe. I mean, girls are bombarded. We are all bombarded by imagery that values appearance. And a lot of those images look like teenage girls. And often they're 12-year-olds who've been made to look quite a bit older, or they're slightly older people who are, bearing a very young appearance. So in some ways, the people who are most, responsive to those are the people who look like the girls in the ads, which are, of course, adolescent girls. Here's, I think, a place to try to start. And it's very hard to get there because we're all so caught up in the culture. Food and weight can actually be neutral. That when it comes to food, there is a biological reality that our bodies need a lot of nutritious food and can definitely handle some what we call sometimes foods, some stuff that's processed and maybe not so nutritious. And that if we engage in food with that way, it's healthy and we're eating in a healthy way. And that's our obligation in terms of taking care of ourselves. And when it comes to weight, if you are too thin, that is not healthy. And if you are overweight, that is not healthy. That we all have a burden that we maintain a weight that is healthy for ourselves. And we do that, again, in the interest of self-care. So I think sometimes parents can actually take it up just from that standpoint. There are biological realities here about how you eat and how much you weigh. And you need to cleave to those because you care for yourself. I think that can sometimes be more productive than saying, "Don't worry about your body. Everybody's beautiful. You look fantastic." I think girls don't find that very compelling. I think they feel like, no, not everybody's beautiful. And you're my parents. What are you going to say? So I actually think sometimes chucking that whole conversation and dealing with the biologies of health is actually a better way to have this conversation.
Have you actually found that teenagers respond to that?
I think they like the relief of a very neutral, matter-of-fact biological reality. They do really well with facts
Right.
that are accurate and they know it. And what I have found, the flip of it, is if you go into a room of teenage girls and say, "You are all gorgeous, everybody is beautiful," they almost sprain their eye-rolling muscles, right? I mean, that's baloney to them. And in some ways, it's baloney in our culture. We don't think everybody's beautiful. We'd like to say we do, but we don't. And I think as soon as you are into a territory where girls know there's not reality on your side, anything you say after that, you're probably wasting your breath.
Right. It's a tough one because a lot of them are doing damage to themselves. I once spoke to someone who had, I guess, I don't know if it was bulimia or anorexia. I just spoke to her by phone. And she told me how much she weighed. And she said, my family, I have a child. I've come close to dying a number of times. And this is an extreme. But she said, I look in the mirror and I see someone who's fat.
Well, and that is the true, that is true of anorexia. And it's a very pronounced disorder that has very powerful cognitive distortions in it.
Right.
But I think the bottom line even there is whatever the cognitive distortions are, this is a person who is struggling to care for herself. And she is not taking good care of herself. And if she can't do it, she needs help doing it. And the same is teenagers.
I really like that in the sense that, almost matter of fact to kids. And it's not saying it once or, and then forgetting about it. But it's really holding them accountable in a way without saying, I'm holding you accountable. Look, these are the facts. This is lawful stuff that happens with your body. And it's up to you. You can just damage to it consistently, or you can choose not to, So maybe it would be useful for you to kind of educate yourself.
You can even say you can take great care of it. When you are taking great care of your body, you're going to feel good.
Yeah.
You're going to have energy. You're going to, be able to do the things you want to do. You're not going to get so tired.
Yeah.
And I think that because adults can walk up to the situation with so many of our own powerful feelings about weight and body image, that we can actually lose track of the fact there are just plain old biological realities here about how much energy kids need and where it comes from.
Yeah. So we're at the end of our time. It's been really great. Thank you so much for your wisdom and the work that you do. And I invite people to check out the book. And you have a website, and I invite people to check that out. Any last message?
Thank you for having me. And I think the bottom line is I wrote this book because I love teenagers. I think they're fantastic.
That's clear.
I think they're interesting. I think a lot of parents feel like it's a very chaotic time of life. For me, this book is about bringing order to that chaos so that we can enjoy our teenagers more.
Yeah, and I really like that. Love your teenagers. You may hate the way they behave and everything else, but the reality is they're so full of aliveness and energy and newness and freshness that if you can start focusing on that, it really shifts things. So thank you so much. And I look forward to checking in with you with your next book.
Well, thanks.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.